there's some belief that is deep-seated, even if you say you don't believe this, that I'm going to pay for my sins when I die. Right? It's in almost every culture. Whether you believe in reincarnation or hell or whatever you believe in, I'm going to pay for my sins when I die. And so even if you say you don't believe it, it's so deep in humanity in terms of the narratives, every narrative that we tell ourselves and every narrative that we tell each other. You're going to pay for it, if not in this life, after. And sometimes I think that this desire to live forever is in a very subconscious way connected to that.
Welcome to the Passing Through Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring those spaces not just within, but also between and around us. The cracks in the walls, the moments between the moments. I speak with thinkers, authors, artists, teachers, and everyday humans who have touched the edge of the ordinary and found something to bring back. There are a lot of things going on in the world right now, and I don't want to bloat this introduction up with a lengthy political... There's a woodpecker outside. I'm in a more rural part of Poland. We're out of the city, so I'm blessed with these sorts of nature sounds now. And maybe that was a warning from the woodpecker not to venture into these dark, political, nerve-wracking, anxious waters. Because if you want to know what's going on, you could just read the news. You could just go on Twitter. Maybe it's better that you don't. Which is that age-old conundrum of, is it better to be informed or to be ignorant of what's going on? Me personally, I'd rather know. That's even a topic that we explore a bit in this podcast, kind of obliquely, where we talk about death, how death is sort of that thing that makes life worth living, because we know our time is precious. So knowing that we're going to die, realizing our mortality and embracing it and using it as a tool to live a deeper, more enriching life is a beautiful way to subvert that fear and anxiety. So maybe instead of talking about the US's war in Iran and ICE agents in airports and Trump's market manipulation and people dying on ventilators in Cuba because of the US blocking oil into the country, maybe I'll just sidestep all of that and instead urge you to take care of yourself. If you are feeling overwhelmed, if it does feel like there's a lot going on, take steps to protect yourself. Moderate your media diet. Go out into nature and listen to woodpeckers. Meditate, do yoga, go for a run. Whatever it is that you do that fits into your schedule and your lifestyle, it grounds you, get to bed earlier. I don't know, but the woodpecker is pecking. So I don't know if he approves or he disapproves of this message, but something tells me that he approves. So without further ado, let's move a bit deeper into the intro and talk about this week's guest. This week, Grace Rachmany is returning to this podcast for the second time. If you're a new listener, you can go back to episode 97 and listen to Grace's first appearance. Since then, she has taken on a new role as the executive director at the Decentralized Identity Foundation. When I spoke to her at the start of the year, when this episode was recorded, she was coming to me from Malaysia at the Network School, which is a school for technologists and entrepreneurs designed to help them learn, burn, and earn. You'll hear us talk about that. We'll talk about the cultural differences between tech bros and hippie eco-villagers. We'll talk about Bryan Johnson and Don't Die. Of course, we'll also talk about death, as I've already alluded to. We talk about a lot of stuff. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Grace is a writer, a consultant, a coder, a mother who directs her energy toward addressing the meta crisis. So she's at home on this podcast. All of the links that you'll need to find Grace will be in the show notes. As always, be good to one another, and I will talk to you next time. I'm going to try and open the van door right now and let you get a little bit of this woodpecker. I inadvertently let in distant sirens, but maybe I've startled the woodpecker. Sounds like he's gone. Welcome back, Grace, to the Passing Through podcast. It is great to be in space with you again.
Maybe we should call it the Passing Back and Forth podcast.
That's only true for some guests. You're one of the lucky few.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored.
And as we start here, I just want to check in and see how you're doing, because there's been some changes since we last spoke. So you're in Malaysia?
Isn't that the default these days? Yeah, I'm in Malaysia. I'm at Balaji's network school, which it's really interesting, right? We met at the Eco Village, which is a bunch of hippies trying to create a new society. And network school is a bunch of crypto bros trying to make a new society. So everybody is all around dissatisfied with how it's going as things change rapidly in ways that are seemingly unpredictable. But then, like, when you listen to the newscasters, they're like, well, this could have been foreseen. It's like, yeah, really? Then you didn't say anything last week. So everyone's dissatisfied. And it really is inspiring to see, like, young people having a thread of hope. And Malaysia was chosen because almost everyone in the world can come here in terms of passports.
Okay.
And it's incredible. It's incredible. It's mostly young men, but there's an increasing number of female people as well. There's a few families here. There's a few people of my generation. And it is a little glimmer of hope. You can still live at a reasonable price and start your startup and find your co-founder, and the place is set up for that. So that's where I am, on this funny little sandbar off of the coast of Singapore.
And I'm curious about the school and what drew you there and what it's like there. So maybe we could paint a little bit of a picture about that, because based on what you just said, it sounds like it's a place where people come together and they are supported in their ability to do their work, meet people, share their ideas, maybe iterate on them. Or how does that look like? Do you have meetings as a big group to discuss things?
So it's really interesting, right? Like, and I just really want to say that the people here are ideological, and it has a bit of the California vibe of people who have status are not flaunting their status. People really just act like everybody's the same.
Okay.
You know, with a few exceptions of people who are very status driven. Those are usually people without status. But the vibe is like we're all just hanging out, and we're all equal. The motto is burn, earn, learn, not necessarily, I don't remember what it is, like earn, learn, burn. So there's do your startup or do your business. There's learn from one another. So they've set up the Luma platform. So they have their little Luma You have to get on their calendar, and we're all of us are doing some sessions about whatever it is we know to teach each other about. At this point, there's 275 people, they said. And then there's a gym, 24-hour-a-day gym, but also they have professional trainers who do training 3 times a day. So if you want to burn with the other people, you got all the equipment to measure yourself. The first thing you do when you get here is like you put your things together. An hour later, you're in the gym weighing yourself, doing like how many push-ups can you do and measuring yourself so that you can get better. The food is all according to Bryan Johnson, which, I'm not a fan, but
And to
it's
clarify,
designed.
Bryan Johnson is this don't die guy?
Don't die.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know a ton about him, but
I
I know that.
I am looking forward to death, unlike Mr. Johnson. However, how I am like I love my life. Don't get me wrong, but I am very into, we talked about composting last time, right? Like make room for some new people, make room
Yes.
for some new birds and trees. So I'm into that. But, these don't die. Eating healthy. All the meals are healthy. It's set up so basically you get up in the morning and your options are eat healthy, go to the gym, go to learn something from somebody else, or work at your computer, or meet some other cool people who are working on something cool. Those are your
Mm.
only options here, really. I mean, you can get on a bus and go somewhere else, but though it's in a hotel, which Balaji and his other investors have helped them. They're sort of fixing up rooms because it's sort of an abandoned place. It was built in the Chinese real estate boom right before lockdowns, and nobody moved
Okay.
in. And so it's really interesting. It's also one of those hermit crab. I think about it like a hermit crab. Here's a bunch of people who want to grow their new society. And look, oh, a shell. And there's more than 100 people that have chosen to take 1-year leases, like 1 year or more lease, who are really here and like, this is good. This is a great setup for us.
Mm.
And about half the people who you have to come for a minimum of a month, or at least pay for a minimum of a month. I mean, you could pay for a month and come for a week. And for an all-inclusive deal, it's quite good. And it's certainly an affordable range for anybody living in a large city almost anywhere in the world. But basically, the setup is designed for you to get here and do your work and meet cool people. And I think it's pretty wonderful. I mean, the community aspects, obviously, that's how we met. I have a
Yeah.
lot of expertise in that, and they do not. And I think that there are some people filling in the gaps, women filling in the gaps of ceremony, et cetera, et cetera. Building a culture is something that is not, it's not foreign to these guys, but it's not a culture that will be welcoming to families, right? Like Silicon Valley has a culture. One of the
Yes.
guys yesterday gave a talk about how he worked for 10 years at Xiaomi, which is this very large Chinese manufacturer of phones, probably the largest in the world, or was at some point largest in the world. And, you work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And he was talking about how rewarding it is. That's building a culture. Do I want to live in that culture? I don't.
No.
Right. So they definitely are people with experience in building culture, the Silicon Valley people. That is a culture. Absolutely true. Startup culture is a culture. But maybe there's some tweaks that they'd like to make there, and there are people coming in and doing that. And I would say the other thing about the culture of Silicon Valley and of technology in general, and people who are business people, is just tell us what's wrong and let's fix it.
Mm.
And so there's really incredibly positive attitude towards feedback. So I think they're doing a lot more right than I expected. I was expecting it to have more of the pitfalls that that we've seen in intentional communities and co-living. And I would say they've got some road bumps, but they've managed not to fall into the pits. Really impressive. Really impressive.
And the immediate question that springs to mind as you were talking about all of that is I guess, stark contrast between the types of culture and community that we would see at something like the Global Eco Village Network gathering and here. And having worked in Silicon Valley myself for a chunk of my adult career, I wonder what the most like striking differences are between those two spaces from your perspective.
I think it's really about individualism versus communal, right?
Okay.
And that has all kinds of things. So, so there's a few, I'll just give a few symptoms, but basically, we're not working on a project together. There's a team of people who work for Network School who are here to help us. We are very strongly encouraged to assist, to, if you see it's broken, either fix it or report it, create your own events. So there's a create your own whatever's missing. There's also encouragement for those who want to build what they're calling layer twos, which I don't know, not the name I think is the right name, but on top of the network school, other businesses. So there's a laundry service which comes from outside, but there's also a bike riding service and a kombucha making service and like all kinds of little startups that have been in the NS Cafe and startups that have been started on top of the platform called the network school that are run like businesses. So there is keep building on top of this thing, but it's an individualistic building thing. So I think last time we talked about like a collective ride sharing, right? It's not collective ride sharing. It's put down your credit card and return your bicycle and pay for your time. And there's somebody who's created a screen rental, right? So rent your computer display. And rather than, pay for your computer display if you're going to be here more than 3 months and leave it for the next cohort, that's not in there. It's starting to happen, but what's really, of course, where is it starting to happen? Friday clothing swap in the ladies' lounge. Friday clothing swap in the like the women have a closet where you can leave things for the next cohort,
Hmm.
you know.
That's nice.
But
That's
it's exactly that ethos. And so we're not, and when we're doing an eco village, it really is we're buying land together. Very infrequently, you have somebody buying it and then you got to pay them back and renting it to you. And that structure has all kinds of difficulties with it because you're not really a co-owner. So it tends to be co-ownership in the eco villages, co-building in the eco villages. Over time, they become more and more communal, but they generally start, I mean, even someplace like Artera Bismundo, which is the Jenny U headquarters, each person has their kind of little mini business, but there's sort of it's designed so you get a better rate for your vegetables and you can help instead of just pay. And it's designed for more communal, taking turns in the kitchen. And this is designed for individual and you start to see little pieces of communal, but that's the main thing. And it expresses itself in all kinds of stuff.
okay. So
And men run it, whereas the Eco Village Network, I mean, women run a lot of it. And then the other changes that since we last spoke is I've been named the executive director of the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which fits in with all the stuff I've been working on.
yes,
And also,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And it's quite an acute need here as well. So you probably noticed I'm wearing a wristband which says Network School on it, and that's to get into the gym and the co-working space and the other facilities so that people just don't just wander in off the street. Like there's not much going on the street out there, but there was at least one incident and they're like, you know what, everybody just keep wearing that. So identity is an issue, right? And they have different logins to the different tools that they use. Like I mentioned, they use Luma. They have an application form, which uses a Google login. They have again, I won't get too geeky on you, but each one of these platforms has a different way that you log in. So identity, which we talked about before with how do you know somebody's a member of an eco village, the same questions come up for your network school. And if you're a network school, you might want to buy some mushrooms from the eco villages. Like you might have a different ethos about how you relate to the earth and how you transact with each other, but you have the same ethos about I should be able to eat whatever mushrooms I want to eat. And so you share certain values. The government should leave me alone. If I want to trade mushrooms because of longevity, don't die, and you want to make mushrooms because, also you want healthier and connection with the earth. Well, maybe we have some things in common that we could interact with, but we definitely need a transport service that doesn't ask too many questions, and we all have identity cards so that we know who to trust. Not that I'm encouraging this behavior, let's be, obviously.
Did you hear about these mushrooms, given that you're in Asia, that cause hallucinations of little people?
I have heard this story. It's in Japan, right? It's in Japanese. I don't know. It suddenly got into the media, right? Suddenly it went viral. It's been going on forever, obviously. But I mean, even things like, okay, don't die, right? It's about longevity. It's about organic food. It's about local food. It's about all those non-processed foods. It's not that we all live in bodies. And so even though everybody has different value systems, there's a lot of overlap just by virtue of the fact that we all live in bodies. We all want love and belonging. We all want families. We all want economic sustainability. We want to be able to feed ourselves and others. We want a roof over our head. So I tend to think that even though these people come from a completely different kind of direction than the eco village, it works for me. You and I both worked in Silicon Valley-like environments, and yeah, I like these people. They're my people.
One concern that I have in hearing a bit about particularly about the don't die guy. And like you said, when we previously spoke, we spoke about the importance of composting. Or right now, you and I are both in a course discussing dissolution and letting go and dissolving. And I wonder, there's something I disliked about the Silicon Valley culture, which was this desire to transcend the body, to achieve a sort of immortality, upload my consciousness into the cloud, and not worry about any of these pesky mortal coils. Do you see that thread as taking a prominent place in the culture there, or not really?
Well, the course we're doing is called The Mythic Body, and there certainly are myths about the Holy Grail and the Fountain of Youth, and they tend to end the same way. So like you want to read to the end of the story about that one, right? So the Tower of Babel, we're all going to be on the same platform. I have a lot of faith in mythology. Mythology reflects the laws of nature.
Yes.
And if things don't die, there isn't room for the next thing. And every sci-fi thing about how you lived forever has some kind of night nourishment. I mean, Cory Doctorow did a pretty good job of like imagining how it wouldn't be horrible in Walk Away, which is like his imagination, it wouldn't be horrible. And I think Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom also there was also some sort of level of living forever. I I think it's nuts, but I think a lot of things are nuts, and a lot of people think I'm nuts, and we're all allowed to have our culture and our desire to do the things they want to do. There has to be a level of obsession with it, and you see that
Mm.
obsession, right? Right with the Bryan Johnsons of the world or the Tim Ferrisses of the world, like these obsessive personalities. They're usually men. I have an obsessive personality too. I'm just obsessed about different things, and most of the people who are obsessed with longevity tend to be incredibly rich men.
Mm.
It's kind of like after you've accomplished everything that you could possibly count in numbers, like there's something about accomplishing that. Like, I'm going to accomplish something that's incredible. I'm going to go to Mars, or I'm going to live forever, or both. Because in order to get to Mars, you have to live a lot longer. I mean, obviously, it's going to take a few light years to get there. It tends to be a very specific demographic that's working very hard on this, and the results aren't good.
Mm.
Men aren't living longer in the West anymore. That's going down.
Yep.
So yeah, and it's not an evil belief. It's just something that is normal human belief that has been with humans, a certain segment of humans, for a very long time. And like every technology, if they actually succeed, they'll find some downsides that they hadn't thought about, just like every other technology. And I won't live to see it. So maybe it's not my problem. But I don't want to be too judgy about it, right? Like that, okay, it's legitimate. You want that. It's not abnormal. That's why there's mythology about it. It's a normal thing for human beings to want. It's very normal. It's all over the mythology because it's something people want.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm not one of those people, but yeah.
I like what you said about that this isn't new. This is pretty old. There are myths and stories about it. And also that it isn't evil because it's such a knee-jerk reaction in our discourse to want to put labels on things as evil or good or right or wrong. But it isn't any of those things. It's just pretty
It's
natural,
against
right?
the laws of nature. It's against the laws of nature, but it's natural to want things to be different.
Mm.
I want to look better. I want to live longer. I want things to be different than they are. It's just so normal.
Yeah. And I wonder, we could go into like weird philosophical headspace now. I wonder why that is. Why are we so averse to accepting things as they are? You know, why is there always this feeling of this could be better? This isn't enough. It was better over there. Where does that come from?
These are questions the Buddha didn't ask. They don't take me anywhere. Like, it doesn't help me in my mission to think much about that.
Hmm. So you don't
Like,
have
that's
a
what I mean by, yeah, no, that's what I mean by, they're questions that I just don't think about at all because they don't really move me forward.
And that leads into another question about moving forward, as though we have to go forward, which is another one of these messages from our culture, which is like onwards and upwards, forward, don't go back. But if you look at the way the waves move on the shore, they come in and they recede, and it's this back and forth motion. So, yeah, I've been thinking about these kind of things lately on the topic of like dissolution in this course that we're taking and like letting go or questioning or interrogating these things. Because to let go of a thing, I've been noticing I first have to see it and then let go of it. And when I see it, I think of like, what is this? What was this for? As it's dissolving and, as I'm taking the pieces of the bones back out of the butter to reassemble the organism. And it's like, what was this piece for? Why is this important? So yeah, this is why this stuff is floating around in my head. And when I see you, it floats up more because I know you may be asking yourself similar
What is
questions.
this? Yeah. Hmm. Well, it is important in the work that I do and in thinking about things like, is there really progress or is this all going in a cycle? Or is it like Balaji was talking about, does it go up and then down again? Or is this some sort of helix that's going up? Like it goes in a cycle, but it's going up, of
Hmm.
course, because we're making progress. And then you've got the Hindu, like, does it all, get big, completely get bigger and then it dissolves again into nothing. Like, and are we on our way up or are we on our way down? Like, what era are we in? I mean, these are interesting things, and I find them most helpful in accepting things the way they are. Understanding that we're in a cycle, that these things take time. Maybe we're going forward, or maybe we're just going in a circle. It helps. I know what's good or bad. Thinking about that helps me accept things the way they are because I don't know the answers to everything. And then accepting things the way they are helps me not be so anxious to progress. Going forward is the construct of the incarnation that we have. I mean, that, in the most spiritual way of saying it. Like, here I am incarnated into this sensation type thing. And in my physical incarnation of this thing, biological, whatever you want to call it, even without the spirituality of it, one of the perceptions that humans have is a perception of time, a
Hmm.
perception of the past, and a perception of the future. And probably most of the living creatures on Earth have that perception. And then you can say, well, what's living, what's not living? All right. But I don't want to go there. But it happens to be that the way that incarnation, biological expression happens on Earth is in a progressive, like there's time, there's yesterday, there's today. There's what's going to happen to me if I do that, and there's what happened last time I tried that. And that happens to dogs too.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that sort of, but Einstein said that time is just a perception of human beings. So even as scientific human beings, we recognize that actually it's a construct, and it's a construct that has to do with how this entity perceives the world. So both spiritually and scientifically, that is the consensus that human beings have come to, is that time is just one of our ways of perceiving. And so in that sense, yeah, I'm going forward. Like I'm here I am today, and I'm not yesterday. I remember yesterday. I might have a prediction about tomorrow. And in certain states of trance, I might think that my prediction is incredibly accurate about tomorrow. And then Einstein might say that since there is no time, of course it is, I would be able to see that. Why wouldn't I be able to see into the future if it's already here? I don't know. But like I said, I just, yeah, there's a progression that happens in time of my age because of the way I was born. Not getting any younger.
No.
That's just the case.
We're not getting younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, time has been something that's been on my mind. You were about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like about death is that it makes me want to make the best of my time on Earth.
Mm.
And this is one of my reasons why I'm not big into living forever. I mean, my capacity for procrastination is quite high. And if I were going to live forever, there's a lot I might procrastinate. And if my children were going to live forever, well, I'll see them next year. Knowing that my time on the earth is finite, my time with my children is finite. When my daughter was born, I kind of started, of course I forgot, and this went away from my memory. I was like, okay, she's 1 year old, probably will be living in the same house until she's 20. That's 5%. And I would kind of start to think about it in percentage. Oh, she's 2. That's like 10% is gone. Knowing that it's scarce makes you want to use it better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with this 1,000,000%.
Yeah. I mean, there's another aspect of not wanting to die, which I don't like to talk about as much, but it really has occurred to me in the particular generation, the boomer generation, that has kind of sucked up all the resource of the world. And although I'm not young, that's my parent, like not quite my parents, like the people just a bit younger than my parents. And the fact that these people are still in power in many places in the world, not everywhere, but many places in the world. And certainly the largest and most militarily powerful countries in the world have this generation of people. And there's some belief that is deep-seated, even if you say you don't believe this, that I'm going to pay for my sins when I die. Right? It's in almost every culture. Whether you believe in reincarnation or hell or whatever you believe in, I'm going to pay for my sins when I die. And so even if you say you don't believe it, it's so deep in humanity in terms of the narratives, every narrative that we tell ourselves and every narrative that we tell each other. You're going to pay for it, if not in this life, after. And sometimes I think that this desire to live forever is in a very subconscious way connected to that. Because these guys who are funding it, we've talked about the cost of the economic system and the horrors that it's wreaked upon the earth and exploiting workers. I mean, even if you're not concerned about the ecology because we're going to fix it with technology, even though you kind of know it's not true, I've exploited workers. I've made $1 bazillion, and there are people who can barely put food on the table in my company, or that my company put out of business, or whatever that. And deep in your subconscious, I think that there's a part of not wanting to die that is connected to, I'm going to pay the price for this. There's a thing with when you're raising children that I read about once, and I don't know why I only read about it once, but that guilt is worse than having your parents angry at you. If your parents are angry at you, you get angry back, like they punished me, and you create a sense of self. But if you keep getting away with things, there's kind of this thing hanging over you, like they're gonna at some point, at some point, at some point, like imagine that at the level of someone who's created technologies or exploited workers at the billion-dollar level. So I think that that's part of that desire to never die is there's a very deep subconscious knowledge that what goes around comes around.
That is a beautifully articulated idea there. I really, really like that for many reasons. One is that there's an unreleased episode that's coming out that touches a bit on the stuff that you're saying right now, but I didn't quite draw it exactly to the place that you did. And I think your vision there is a bit deeper. So I really like that. And it reminded me when I was reading Plato's Republic in university, there's a question that's in that story where they ask, well, isn't it better to be unjust, but to appear just to everybody else so that you can get away with all of these crimes and appear like a saint, but you're, a sinner? And Socrates is like, no, like that's not the way. And the guy's arguing that no, but because look, you get all of the benefits of both, and you just get to deceive people. And then Socrates goes on to illuminate, well, the people that are deceiving people live with this. They have to look over their shoulder at who they've wronged. Maybe someone's coming after them. They have no peace. They know that they can't truly trust anyone. And so he starts to paint this picture of how it scars the soul, and you get this weird warped kind of perception of the world that you live in, where everything is a threat, everything is a danger, you're not safe anymore. But it's all because of what you've done. It's not necessarily because of what anybody else may do to you. It's your own guilt that's haunting you, like what you're describing here.
Yeah. And if I did it, somebody else could do it also. Like you're going to perceive the world. But yeah, like I guess that's known as Plato's virtue signaling.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great phrase.
Right? Like, isn't virtue signaling good? I mean, and you know this. One of the things I mentioned right at the beginning of this is that here I am, and there's people of different status here, but people don't do status signaling here. They just sit at dinner with everybody. And there isn't virtue signaling, it turns out. And there's a few people who do it, and they're usually not the people with status. And the network school is very egalitarian. There's like, we don't do virtue signaling. Like you have virtue or you don't have virtue, and we don't need to signal it. And there's almost a inverse relationship, if you look at politics, between virtue signaling and virtue.
Mm. Yeah, politics is something that's been on my mind the past few days or weeks, just looking at what's happening back in the States. And it's hard to get away from it. Like everywhere, I open my phone, I go on social media, I get a text message from a friend or call from a family member, and everyone's distraught and upset about the political situation in the States right now. And yeah.
I noticed something really distorted about me. I like to listen to the Multipolarity podcast. They're fabulous. I love the Multipolarity guys. And I love to listen to it. And sometimes I'll listen to something else, I don't know, Breaking Points or some other Unheard, right? Like these sort of alternative media outlets. And I like my apocalypse porn. And one of the reasons I like my apocalypse porn is because it's confirmation bias. Yep, I knew they were good. I knew those guys are bad guys.
Mm.
Yep, there never was a real, there never really was rule of law. Yep, the Americans really always were out to, like, yep, everything I knew is, and I noticed that I enjoy that apocalyptic news because it gives me the security that I know what's what. You know, if things were going real smooth, I'd be like, ooh, something's wrong about my theory of how the world works, Like my sock puppet is talking to me. The cultural reference. Anyway, like the Bo Burnham reference of the sock puppet. But yeah, it's like, as long as the news keeps coming to me that confirms my bias about what's going on in the world, I feel comforted rather than shocked.
Yeah.
And then when people come to me and they're shocked, I'm like, why are you shocked? Didn't you know? I'm so righteous. So yeah, just to sort of be a little vulnerable about noticing that about myself. Like, I noticed that. I'm quite satisfied with the chaos because it fit my expectations, not because I want it, but it fit my expectations and shows that I'm pretty smart.
Yes.
Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, that resonates with me. That's like the dark satisfaction of that stuff where
Mm.
it's like the I told you so. But
Delicious.
yeah, yeah, it's good to be aware of that. I'm glad you brought that up because that kind of weird shadow benefit of bad news or apocalyptic porn is often unspoken or unnoticed.
Yeah.
So I think you verbalizing that is nice because even for me, when you were saying it, I said, "Yeah, that's true. That's there." But I don't know if I even noticed that that was an element of what was happening, and definitely
Yeah.
is.
Because I did ask myself the question, why do I feel better every time I listen to this podcast? Because I'm right. It's a good thing I'm living in Europe because you guys, I am right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it came from asking myself the question, why do I feel so much comfort when I listen to these guys? Other than the, beautiful Irish accent and everything.
There's also this other aspect of it, which is the devil you know, right? When it's the stuff that you foresaw, maybe, in quotes, and it's
That you're
familiar to
prepared
you.
for.
Yeah,
I'm prepared for that. I'm not
yeah.
prepared for the other thing.
So maybe there's that element of it too, which still feeds into what you're describing, where it gives you a sense of comfort and composure and safety in a way, like a dark, twisted kind of safety. But
Yeah.
I wondered the people who, like my family and friends who are back in the States, I wonder, does knowing that change that dynamic? Would somebody look at, sit there and doom scroll less when they know that it's helping to reinforce certain worldviews and it gives them this kind of dark pleasure? Or would they just do it more, or would it make no change? I wonder.
Well, I don't care as long as they eventually admit that I was right and they were wrong. It's interesting. Like, there's a thing that we do that we're not conscious of. And you and I talked about MVP versus other communication styles, which is, I come out of the landmark worldwide communications curriculum. And one of the things you'll hear said, not just there, but in other places, that word makes world. Like, we think that we're describing the thing out there, but
Hmm.
we are creating the thing out there, right?
Yes.
That's why the first words in the Old Testament, like, how did God create the world? In our current, and again, there's many mythologies where it's from clay, or in the dissolution myths, right? Something exploded. And even in the Talmud, it's also described that Bereshit, in the beginning, it kind of implies there was something before. There's an implication, and most people who've studied any of that chapter know that there's an implication that there was something before. And then you do have Noah's flood, right? You have dissolution and recreation within the Old Testament, but the world is created with the word, And then he said, "Let there be light." He just said it like that, abracadabra, which also that in the Hebrew scriptures means I will create as I say. Abracadabra actually comes from those words.
Hmm.
So I will create as I say. That's what abracadabra means. And so it was really instilled in us to be careful about what you say, And maybe that's why I noticed this thing about my having this kind of, enjoyment, is that if you say things like all politicians are corrupt, what are you going to get? And if you badmouth your politicians and you don't say things like, look, they're doing the best they can as leaders, or they're inside of a system or whatever, if you go around talking about how evil everybody is, you're creating that. And you can do that with people too, if your expectation, and that's a little bit like what you were talking with Plato's virtue signaling. Good thing we have a name for it now. That as you speak about, like, as you speak in a bad way, you start to believe other people are that way as well. And if you're being manipulative, and if you think, well, it's just better to be, the best way to be is to be manipulative, then you assume a lot of other smart people are manipulative because you've just said it's the best way to be. And so that you're speaking about it creates it in the world. And then when you come into conversation with people, and this is true of almost every conversation. I mean, unless you're very highly trained, it's something like you always come into a conversation with an expectation and then preparing yourself for your expectation. So if you expect this to be a good, calm conversation, like you come in and you're kind of like chill, and if you expect it to be a little confrontational, you're going to sit a little bit differently. You're just going to sit a little differently, So you didn't say anything different, but you kind of tightened your shoulders a little bit, and your face looks a little strained, and you wonder why the conversation kind of went like the person's like, oh, I don't know, I felt nervous around them, and I just moved my body a little bit, but you could feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're creating all the time other people's reactions. And this is sort of where I part with the nonviolent communication. If somebody spoke to me a certain way, I would ask myself, what did I do to cause that reaction? Not because it's true. Like maybe they really are a difficult person, or they woke up and they didn't get their coffee. But I ask myself that, like, what did I do to cause that communication to come in my direction? And what could I do to cause a different type of communication to come in my direction? And then I don't worry about somebody else's way of expressing themselves. Like, was it inappropriate how they said that? Is less important than, can I move this conversation in a way that matches my commitment? And so that's sort of like my big beef with that sort of format of, there's violent communication and there's nonviolent communication, there's whatever. I'm like, there's the communication that comes at me, there's the communication around me. And yeah, somebody this morning was confused, like they were confused that whatever, they hadn't had their coffee yet. And they said, oh, my brain is broken. I said, don't say that. I just don't say that about yourself, right? So there's really being in a position where I want to speak what I want to happen.
Mm.
And it might seem kind of maybe airy-fairy or something, but you can see it. It influences your whole world. If you say hello to somebody, a stranger, and smile, they kind of have to smile back at least. That's
Yeah.
not that's not woo-woo. It's like if you smile at everybody on the street, a very large number of people will be smiling back at you.
When I smile at people on the street, they cross the street for some reason. So that
Show me your smile. Let's practice this.
No, but I agree with what you're saying. It's to me, the words we utter are magical spells. That they are these powerful incantations, not just because of what they do to someone else, but what they do to us. Like what you were saying, you start to see what you say and say what you see, and it becomes the self-reinforcing cycle. And I don't know. There have been times when I've been at Vipassana retreats where I'm meditating, and it takes, I would say, a few days for all of the conversational stuff that happens, it's like, to me, it feels like gum stuck under a desk in school. Like anything that's said to you, they go under there. There are all these pieces of gum, and it takes some time, and they harden and they get stuck. Some are softer than others, but it takes time to like scrape those things off and have it smooth again, and not have any words or thoughts echoing and reverberating through your mind. So I saw firsthand the power that words have, just casual things. It could be one word and it could just stick in there.
And one of the things that was, and I think most people have some version of this, one of the things that was said to me when whatever I did, like something went wrong or something was a mistake, was like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? And I spent a lot of my life wondering about that question, because it was always said by somebody in an authoritative position, a parent or a teacher, like, what's wrong with you?
Hmm.
And it was maybe I was in my mid 40s before I could see how much of my life was research into what's wrong with me or trying to hide what's wrong with me, like not being in intimate relationships, because they're going to find out. I mean, I don't know what it is, but for sure they're going to know, that thing.
Hmm.
They're good, that thing that other people know about you that's wrong with you that you don't know what it is, but they're going to find it out.
Yeah.
Everyone has that. Everyone has that. I think that's important to say. Everyone has that thing that they know that if they only knew, I don't know what it is, but if they knew, and they can see it. And so a lot of my life, and when I did, it was actually a tantric weekend, and we did Osho's dynamic meditation. And there was like a part where I was just like screaming, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" And just that was a really sticky piece of gum at the bottom of the desk.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that and for describing that phenomenon, because as you were speaking it, I knew it in myself as well. And it reminded me of a time when I was doing a community building workshop, and one of the co-facilitators on my team I was feeling some kind of tension in myself towards this person. And I was like, what is it? What is it about this person that bothers me and unsettles me? And when I reflected on it, I saw that what it was what you're describing. And I said, oh, what's bothering me is that she looks at me as though she sees that I know that I'm a piece of shit. And like she knows my dark passenger. She knows like what's wrong with me, that I hate myself, or I'm, whatever it is. And she could see it. And I don't like that she can see it. Only I should have access into this because this is my secret. This is my thing to hide and hold. And yeah, it's a weird thing that we all have these deep insecurities about ourselves that were planted there generally by some word or encounter in the past, and it just sticks in there
Yeah.
until we notice it.
And yeah, and you don't, and as a parent, you don't know which of those things you said is the one that sticks.
Ooh.
Like you said some casual thing, and your kid is like, it's really hard. Like you said some casual remark. And again, in the landmark workshops, we did a lot of work with these things, and people would have like the most casual remark that was made by a parent who was cooking dinner, and said, "That's nice, dear," instead of, "Oh my God, that happened to you today." And, until as an adult, they decided, man, people don't care about me, don't listen to me. And when it's something, it's called a recreation exercise. It's in one of their advanced courses. And you go back to the incident. And when they go back to the incident, people can see that incident for what it is. Oh, my mom, we had 4 kids. She was just cooking dinner. She didn't pay any attention. And it's really interesting, that recall and being able to go back to those events and really seeing it from your parents' perspective. I had somebody talking about their parent wouldn't let them go out and roast potatoes. It was pouring, and their friends wanted to go out and do roasted potatoes or something in Slovenia. This is a thing. Apparently, you go to caves and you roast potatoes, you know. And when they did the exercise, they remembered that their mom's brother had almost died from some incident in the woods or something. And so they're like, actually she had said it too harsh because of her fear that it happened to her in her childhood, and it's like dragging it on for the next generation. She said, no, no roasted potatoes. That was all she said. It wasn't, it was some casual comment. And the guy decided that, my mom never understood me and people don't love me. And I never get to do what I want to do. And this person was going around like kind of a little bit miserable that with their life and how many rules there are about what you can never do because his mom said no potatoes. It's, and she didn't do anything wrong. But it's interesting, right? Like these, and she probably said 100 other equally casual things, none of which stuck.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
You have unlocked a brand new fear inside of me. I
Oh,
I've been talking with my partner about the prospect of having kids, and I am generally not so into the idea because I have all these fears about it. I have these fears that, yeah, the kid could be sick. The kid could be born with some terrible disease. I was born with a rare congenital problem that required like immediate open heart surgery within my first year of life. I almost died. So I was like, my genes aren't even good. Like, there's a chance that the kid could have this too. So even if the kid was healthy, maybe at the age of 4 or 5, the kid goes missing, or the air conditioner falls on its head out of a building. Like so many crazy things can happen. And I have so much fear about that process, so much so that it makes me not want to do it. And when I think of the world that we're in and how unstable it is and all the environmental and social problems and all these things. But now what you're saying, that there could be some off the cuff remark that I make that could just be a life wound for somebody. And like that's just a terrifying prospect for me. So yeah, when you said that, I would
so I'll
like
say a few things. I'll say a few things about that. First of all, if everybody had no trauma, life would be so boring. Like if every child turned out perfect, you would hate your life and you would hate your friends. Like everybody would be so freaking perfect. And, you know, like there wouldn't be a fun world to live in. So that's the first thing. The second thing to say about it is if you can find 3 parents who tell you that parenting was not the most rewarding, wonderful thing that I ever did, then don't have children. But I pretty much guarantee you won't be able to find 3 people like that. Not that they said it was fine and I enjoy it, like that they say this was the most. I have 2 children. And you're not interviewing me because I'm a good mom. You're interviewing me because of all these external status things, right? And some intellectual, like apparently I'm smart or I don't know, right? Successful in some external terms. But whenever I have to fill in one of those forms that says, what's your greatest accomplishment? I know. And are they perfect? I think they're right? I think they're just awesome. And my daughter will sometimes say, I feel like you have criticism of me and you don't like accept me the way I am. I'm like, but you're the most awesomest. Like, just what do you mean? I mean, and it's something I said when she was, like I am judgmental, right? But and the final thing I would say is listen to Josh's trauma episode. Have you listened to that one? It opens with this beautiful poem about the trees.
I don't think I have.
It opens with this beautiful poem about the trees and the knots in the trees and how one is leaning over this way and one is like you can see where it was scarred because somebody tapped it for the sap and the absolute beauty in trauma. That the forest is beautiful because of it. Listen to the trauma episode, Josh's trauma episode. That episode really had a strong effect on me. Like, yeah, that's what we're made of. We're made of our special little scars. And that's where the light gets in. That's where the sensitivity to other people happens. That's where our challenges come. And that's where we see what we're really made of. Can I overcome that in order for this partner that I've got or for this child I've got? I mean, my daughter was a quiet child. to get her to say anything, I had to be quiet for many seconds, many, many, many seconds. And I was like a high-tech bro, and none of it. They're wonderful teachers, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you for everything you just said. That's some good stuff for me to chew on, some good pieces of gum to put under the desk and chew on later.
Yeah, it's not an intellectual, like you'll hear people say things like, well, if we good people don't have children, what about the bad people have more children? I don't buy that. It's just rewarding to have them around. They're kind of nice. They're just kind of nice.
I guess the strongest of those concerns that I mentioned is the loss of the child. That's the, or the child has to live with a severe disability from a young age, and the quality of their life is just hard. That those things would be very painful to me. And that's not to say it wouldn't be rewarding, it wouldn't be beautiful, it wouldn't be
Hmm.
important, but something about the I feel like there's already enough pain in the world, and to bring a life into it that pain is the dominant characteristic, something about that makes my organism.
Well, the cup is already broken. I mean, that's all you can really say about that. I mean, I'm really fortunate, right? Both of my children are basically healthy. They were born healthy and, within the parameters of normal raising of a child and not any extra stuff. And I'm a busy dude, and I don't know what I would do if I had ended up with a child who required a lot of attention. And when I see people who are in that position, they seem like they feel like it's their mission in life to care for that human being. That's how those people seem to me. People who are born with children with all kinds of stuff. Their parents look like people who have a mission
Yeah.
and who love their child. I mean, again, that's my observation of those people, right? I've noticed parents who had much more challenges to deal with than I did. And I don't know, do they seem happy? Do they seem satisfied? Do they seem whatever? They don't seem tragic to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I my observation has been the same, and I guess I don't mean to sound like I'm saying that, oh, I wouldn't want a child with a disability. I technically, I guess, said those something like that, but what I meant was I don't want, because then we're making these hierarchical judgments, right? That is better to not be disabled. Everyone is going to join the disabled community as we age, and it doesn't say anything about your person. This is just something that you have to live with. So I want to clarify that it's not hierarchical thing. It's just like, oh, the
Well, I mean,
pain.
that's kind of yeah, it's the pain, right? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's like also political correctness around it. It is easier to have a child who's easy to raise. And that's true of every child that's easier or harder to raise. The easier to raise children are easier to raise, whether it's because that one has more temper tantrums, or because that one can't hear, or because that one, whatever it is about your child that makes them easier. My children were like, they would play with like alone or with each other, even when they were very small. They were easier than some child who runs around and is incredibly, maybe they turn out to be an Olympic athlete, but in the meanwhile, they're knocking over the lamps, right? An easier child is easier. And it's less time consuming. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, right? And there's something about that that kind of strikes me in this area of burden, which is I've been thinking a lot about that. And I mentioned that to you on our last thing. When I was going through this grieving process before I had this job, there was constant feeling of like I'm going to be a burden on my family. And the idea that I'm going to have a child that's a burden on me, on my family, and when we go over to my mom's house, they're going to have these special needs, and like this, the way that society regards that is really heavy. Also,
Yeah.
we don't have a communal society that helps you raise a child like that,
No.
right? And it really is a burden on individuals, and most people don't have even a parent who would be like, why don't you move back home? Then the four of us can raise the child, and you can have another child, who will also help us around. We don't have those systems. We've really, like, it's really put a lot on the individual that it's not very natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that and the society that we've built is optimized for the able-bodied, young kind of person. You think of something as simple as like a stoplight. If you're elderly and you're not so mobile, getting across the street and the amount of time that you have to get across the street could be an ordeal. It's stressful. You have to hurry. That whole thing is optimized for a specific kind of person. Getting into a building, it might not be wheelchair accessible. So how does someone get into the building now? So little things that people who are able to don't think about, but people who have to live with disabilities see the world in a very different way because the world isn't designed with that type of person in mind, which is another burden for that person to bear.
I don't know if they bear it like a burden. If you've always been a certain way, you've always been a certain way. I mean, I dated a guy who had had an injury when he was in his 20s, late teens, and he was in a wheelchair, and he walked fast. I was like, dude, hey, I got legs here, slow down. Um, and he just knew which movie theaters had a accommodating place, and I don't know. I mean, he was awesome. You know, it wasn't the right match, but of course he saw the world differently than I did, and of course, but it was his life, and it's really interesting. I saw this young, it's about 2-year-old this weekend, when I was at services, and there's a meal after the service, and they're sitting next to this guy and his daughter who had one of those things that you have if you don't hear well, it helps, what I'm talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew what she would, and she also had something that was helping her speak. And this child was just everybody's 2-year-old. She was bright and sweet and very nice, and she had these aids to have her. And I thought about those aids because they haven't been around my whole life, and I know some people who got them later in life. And the people who get them find them incredibly noisy. I mean, imagine you've been around for 25 years, no sound, and all of a sudden you put this thing on, it's like, whoa. Those people take them off at night, like they can't sleep. And sometimes they just take them off to get a break because it's a lot. And I just thought about, I mean, I asked him, at some point, he's like, she has this thing. I said, oh yeah, I know what that thing is. And I said, does she ever take it off just to get a break? Because she was born, but as soon as they found out she couldn't hear, she had that aid. And does she ever just take it off to get a break from all the noise? And she says, no, she comes right up to me to put it back on. And so even something that is really quite, it in some ways a disability, right? You don't hear. Deaf people don't see it that way, and some people choose not to have that type of aid because, wow, it is noisy out there. And I've learned to navigate the world from the perspective that I have. And okay, maybe I could have a richer world, or maybe I could have a noisier world. And choice, I have free choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's good not to make a sweeping generalization, and it's case by case. Everybody's going to have their relationship because everything's relationship, right? Their relationship
Yeah.
with their limitations. That I think that's what all of us are doing, right? We're navigating our relationship with our limitations and trying to accept them and not deal with those limitations by trying to eradicate them in the case of death, like what we were talking about earlier. Death is a limitation and it's a gift, and learning how to dance with it is what it's about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you can think of people who have some positive attribute. Like I knew somebody who was really popular, and their problem was they were popular because they were good at dealing with people and they could get along with anybody. But their problem was choosing the right friends because they
Mm,
kind of like everybody. and they kind of get along with everybody. And it's like, Nick, how do I know who the high integrity friends are? I kind of like everybody, and I'm good with everybody, and everybody likes me. And there's an expectation of me to get along with people and to make peace with these groups. And they were high skilled person having to navigate their limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't
blessings.
win. Can't win.
Blessings can be curses. I have a friend
Yeah.
who is a very good looking guy and successful with the ladies. And he always jokingly says it's a blessing and a curse because he can't tell, like, do people just like me because I'm charming and attractive and I seem fun, or do you actually like me for who I am? And that's a strange place to be in. I guess if you have some celebrity status, you have this as well. If you have a exceptional amount of wealth, you have this too, or you're extremely talented, like you're saying, even positive things can be problematic for you.
They're yeah, like their limitations or their whatever the boundaries in which you live. Was there other stuff you wanted to cover today? Because I don't know if we covered any of the things that we said we were going to cover at all.
I went into this with a totally open, just see where the wind blows us kind of approach. I wasn't trying to steer anything, which I have been enjoying a lot because it allows me to not have to keep checking something else to go, did we check this? Did we check this? So I could just be with you.
It's
Um,
interesting because the curiosities were sort of around getting along and ethnicities and associating with like your place of birth.
yes.
And I was just in the hallway here, and there was a Ukrainian woman, and a guy showed up today, and she introduced him to. I was sitting with an American guy, and the two of us were sitting there, and she introduced this, and then she said he would, you know, and then people ask where you're from, okay, and she said he was from Russia, but he was kind of like, I'm from the Soviet era, areas. Like he didn't want to see, and that like here's this Ukrainian woman introducing this Russian guy, right? And it's such a natural thing to say where you from, like what culture are you from, where are you from? And here we are in a location where that's the case. There's Ukrainians and there's Russians and there's Pakistanis and there's Indians and there's you name it, right? You name the border, those people are here. And still, I think that today a lot of us are uncomfortable saying where we're from
Hmm.
or even what we belong to or where we associate with. And some people have the privilege. I mean, I knew immediately that, he said, I live in Germany. He said, I live in Germany, right? As somebody says that, I don't push it. And there's this, we know that everybody is a person, and we can guess that almost everybody disagrees with their government's policy. Right. So if you're Russian, it doesn't mean that you as an individual invaded Ukraine. And if you're Ukrainian, it doesn't mean that you are, whatever, like whatever you think about a Ukrainian person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we all know that we disagree. And if you're Iranian, right? Oh my goodness, you're Iranian. And then the assumption if you're Iranian is that you ran away because you hate the government, not that you're from the bad guys,
Mm.
which is right. It's very interesting. But if you are Russian, you're from the bad guys. And if you're Israeli, you're from the bad guys. And if you're from, like there's like I think that the only one I can think of that's like that is kind of Iranian. If you're Iranian, you ran away from the bad guys. And maybe if you're Venezuelan also. If you're Venezuelan, you ran away because you don't like your government. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's certain ethnicities that if you meet them on the street, your assumption is that that individual left because they hate the country. And there's certain individuals that if they mention their country, then you assume they're the bad guy. And it's kind of arbitrary. Most likely, if you meet them not in their country, guess what? They don't like their government. The ones that like it and believe in that policy stayed.
Yes. Yes. For the most part, yes.
For the
This
most part, right? Not obviously, whatever. There's some percent, and maybe it's 20%, 30% that love their government and are just traveling around having a good time. But generally, if you left, it's because you, right? But there is, like, I notice that. Like, I notice that, oh yeah, if I see certain people from certain ethnicities, I immediately think they must have run away, which they might have just gotten a job somewhere too. They might have they might be completely neutral.
yes, this is a great uh this is a great way to step into the water on this topic, because I feel that in myself when people ask me where I'm from. And I have to say that I'm from the US because I perceive the US as just a bad actor on the world stage. I don't agree with the politics. I don't agree with their actions or behavior. And now I feel like I have to explain all of this and say, hey, I'm not one of the bad guys. You know, so I know what you're describing. And in America, at least, the messaging is that we're the heroes. So when you leave a place, you might have some culture shock when people aren't treating you as the hero. And suddenly, you're the villain and you're like, what did I do to you? So there's all these narratives around cultural identities, or maybe less cultural and more national identities, because the nations are usually what people have the problems with, right? The actions of a nation. That could be a good way to talk about, because this is one of the things we spoke about last time, which is your feelings, your observations, your existence as an Israeli, seeing what's happening. I haven't had a voice to share those things on this podcast yet. I've had Palestinian guests, but I haven't had one speak about what it's like to live through this time as an Israeli.
It's interesting, Minette. I don't think I'm representative of a lot of people. I left before it happened, knowing it was going to happen. And I left before it happened, knowing it was going to happen. So again, it's really hard. I just really want to say, I'm going to say things that will not represent all Israelis. And I may say things that some Israelis will feel very confronted or like I'm a total jerk. Okay. Like, how can you say that? You aren't in the country. And I think we all feel that to some degree. Like, if you weren't there when it happened, whatever the it was for your particular nation, if you weren't there, you shouldn't be speaking about the it,
Mm,
rather than, oh, maybe you've got some perspective from standing aside, right? And I was active in the community trying to help the refugees who had come in from Africa. And initially, the Israeli policy towards these African Sudanese and Eritrean people was refugees. We have to give them citizenship. But when the flow started getting more, the Israelis were like, let's give them some kind of temporary card. Because Israel had never prepared itself administratively for an influx of refugees, because nobody wants to come live in Israel. Like, it's not an appealing country, and there are a bunch of Jews there. We never set up an administrative office to handle non-Jewish immigrants, because we didn't. And also, it's a Jewish state. We don't really want that. It's like part of our ethnicity is we're supposed to welcome all the Jews and the other people if they happen to be there because they were there by marriage or by birth. Like, okay, they should get equal rights, and within the Green Line, they do have equal rights, but you know how that is. That, like, ethnic minorities have problems everywhere. I don't want to glorify that. Um, but there was no administrative readiness for it, and it proceeded to, like, for 10 years, not to handle the situation and to kind of intentionally leave it the way it was, and to impose laws on these refugees that were designed for the Palestinian situation and for terrorists. They weren't designed for people who are 15-year-olds running away from Sudan and not wanting to shoot a gun. And so the situation was quite inhumane in many ways and really problematic. And I saw some of the places in the desert where these people were being held. Like, there were concentration camps in my country. Like, really, really. And what I saw, I have a lot of background in what it takes to change a government or a country. And in the things that it takes is the media academia, the government, the enforcement and judicial systems, and the citizenry. I think there's a sixth as well. And when those, four of those six entities start to move in a direction, the country moves in that direction. And I saw when it happened with these refugees, they built a wall. They just built a wall so they couldn't get in anymore. And the citizenry didn't have a lot to say about it. They were activists like myself, but they were a small amount. The media said that these people were looking for work. They were just looking for work. I told you the citizenship and the government situation, right? Academia just not of interest in any way. And, enforcement, like not on their side. And I thought, we don't have anything. That's the end of the dream for me of this country that is a democracy. Like if I can see with my own eyes, which I did, an actual concentration camp in our country, that's the end of the dream. And after a few years of working on that, I just knew I couldn't stay. I mean, I knew what was next, and what's happened now is what's next. It's not an easy thing to watch, but it's not big freaking surprise. And I love my country. When I go back there, those are my people. That's where I want to live, but I can't be part of perpetrating that. And when I see the people and people are on the street there's a peace movement, and nobody thinks that the extension of this war is good. But there are many things, and the way that the war has been waged, and we just saw this in Venezuela, like, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to say something, the opposite thing, which is kind of crazy. I'm going to say a crazy thing, which is the idea that instead of fighting boots on the ground, because if you're Israel, like, how many boots have you got? Instead, we're going to do targeted attacks against your leadership and knock them out in their homes. In some ways, that's more ethical. Like, it's completely against the laws of war, right? Like the rules of war. And then you think, well, who made those rules? And who are the ones declaring war? So what happens if instead of putting troop boots on the ground, you're like, I've got these really interesting sonic things that can cause people to have sudden heart attacks. And then who wants to mess with Israel? Because a lot of these world leaders, they don't care about boots on the ground. They don't care if their young people die. But if they might be killed in their home by some weird sonic thing or a blowing up telephone, like maybe you can actually stop war that way. And so like it took a lot. It's not formulated in my mind because it's so against the rules of war that you could kill the leader in his home, even though, in fact, the leader is the one causing the war, not the troops on the ground. Like, I'm not happy about, like, hey, let's go to Venezuela and abduct the head of state. Like, it's so shocking and so wrong. Like, it's so obviously wrong. But then I'm like, but wait a second. Those rules were made by those leaders. They made the rule that it's okay to send my son to go shoot somebody else's son, but it's not okay to kill them, even though they're the one who made the decision. Like, maybe my whole concept about what a war crime isn't like something. So I haven't fully allowed my brain to transition to thinking that that's ethical, but I'm tending to think that maybe it's not the war crime we've been told it was. Like, maybe that prevents war more than sending troops is, oh, yeah, we might just knock you and your wife off. But, like, I'm not encouraging that behavior either. Like, let's be clear. I don't encourage that behavior. But there's something about, and that's what the Israelis started to do. Like, the Israelis started to blow up people's phones, kill nuclear scientists in their homes, which is, oh, my gosh, you killed a nuclear scientist. Well, what if somebody had done that to Oppenheimer? It's like, no, you think of it. Right? We don't think of Oppenheimer as Hitler. But I did a few years ago, I lost a good friend of mine, like not I stopped talking to him because he moved from working for GM to working for Lockheed Martin on self-driving vehicles. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, like you said, "Don't you, like we're saving the Ukraine from the Russians and we're the good guys." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. You're working for the killing people." And I stopped talking. He's like, "You're a fanatic." I'm like, you can't be my friend." And we'd been talking. We were friends for 7 years, every week. Really good friend, one of my best friends. I'm like, "But you're working for the killing people now, and your good guy argument doesn't wash with me. Get a job somewhere else." Right? So I guess that sort of covers what you asked in a variety of ways. And I think my opinions on it contradict each other. I think there's one final piece. There's a really big loss and I think the pandemic prepared me for it, is understanding what starts to happen to our brains in trauma states. And I felt like that during the trauma state that I was in during the COVID. There were certain things that I realized in retrospect I had not thought through, and that like I had gone into this freeze and survival mode, and there were certain things that I did that I'm like, why did I do that? That was a little, you know, um, or the level of obedience that I had to these regulations was very high. And it took a very many months for me to look back and being like, I'm not sure that washing hands thing was, is that, you know? So I understood what was going on. And because of the conflicts that we had with our families, all of us, whatever we felt was the right thing to do, I could see how the trauma made it impossible to have a reasonable argument. And I could see there was a part of your brain that died. Not that my family wasn't the same people, but there was a part of their brain that switched off, that couldn't have a civil discussion instead of an argument about who's right.
Yeah.
Like, how about I send you some articles and you'll send me some articles and we'll try to talk it through. That was not the default for most, like that didn't happen, right? Because I think there's a part of your brain that turns off during trauma response. And I could see that in my friends, in my children who were in the country at the time. I could see that, no, one of my children, the other child wasn't, one of my children had already left, but I could see that when I went to visit and talking to people over coffee. So what do you think about the situation? And I could see that there were parts of the brain that had seen some things. I mean, the things that these people had to see, the funerals that young people had to go to. And then, this started with a war where territory was taken and had to be retaken. And these young people went in there and saw things. And I don't know how that looks. And because it never happened to me. But I could start to understand that in my conversations with people who support these actions, that something switched in their brains, that's how trauma works. And you hear people saying things like that, like Jordan Peterson actually is famous for saying this, like whatever you think of him, is that if you don't think that you could have been a Nazi, you don't understand. That's how he got to where it like became a psychiatrist, because he's like, how do people become like that? And he argues that anybody could become like that. And it's really interesting. He went through some traumatic events in his own life and, said some things that maybe were regrettable and ruined some relationships, maybe in a regrettable way, right? But if you don't think that could happen to your brain, if you don't think that you could be that person shooting another human being, then you don't understand, because it's all of us. And so I don't want to say I understand, because I don't understand, but I have an intellectual framework for understanding how it is that people can perpetrate these things. And just last week, I got a text from somebody who's my friend who wrote me, "I'm really sorry that Hitler didn't do a better job." This is a European person. And I know that she's dating somebody Lebanese. And all of a sudden I get this text from her. I'm really sorry that Hitler didn't do a better job. I won't read you the whole text, but that was the gist of the text. And I can see what happens. I don't know what happened to her girlfriend's family, right? But I could imagine something had happened either to her girlfriend or her girlfriend's family, and that she saw it with her own eyes, and that something switched in her brain. Imagine waking up in the morning and get that text. Like you can see it's not, I have an intellectual framework for understanding that's all of us. None of us are better than that. And so I think that's important to say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I, yeah, I, it reminds me of a quote that I shared a few episodes back by James Baldwin when he's talking about a similar thing where he talks about like how love is what's important, and understanding and compassion, and knowing that you are everyone else. And when you go into that city street and you see that monster, or you see that cop, or you see that drug addict, that's you. Everyone is you. And I think you're echoing a similar thing here, where given the right conditions, the right set of experiences or traumas, this can happen. It doesn't mean it will happen, but it means you are susceptible to this happening, like in the COVID example. Not everybody lost their mind and went into like screaming rage quits on relationships, but a lot of people did. I had those kind of interactions with some of my family members. So I know what you're talking about. I know what it feels like. I know when the pressure is high and things get weird. And sometimes after the dust settles, it never kind of corrected itself and it just stays weird. And I don't know what the way to deal with that is.
I had a friend who, in Israel, we had all kinds of, immigrant country. And I had a friend who was South African, a white guy. And he said, I lived here 8 years before I understood that apartheid was wrong.
Mm,
That's how long it took me to heal my brain. 8 years.
wow.
Right. And he hadn't killed anybody or, whatever. He was just kind of a rich white guy who left the country when things got violent. So if you did kill somebody, or saw somebody die in front of you, how many years does it take for your brain to repair? He told me 8 years just to realize that apartheid was wrong, of living in an egalitarian society, or whatever, egalitarian such as it is, right? Like there is definitely some prejudice in that society. So yeah, how long does it take your brain to heal after having gone through that trauma? I don't know that there's an answer. And for some people, it's never.
Mm-hmm.
We had some Vietnamese refugees living with us for a while after, in the 70s and 80s. And I said to my mom, they never talk about the war. And my mom said, healthy people never talk about the war. Oh, never might be when that trauma repairs. Because it can only heal when that person's brain starts to heal. And, otherwise you can really kind of never talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, we've gone a bit over.
I was gonna say we're at time, and unfortunately in a kind of dark place to end the episode, but that's how life is sometimes.
The solution.
So I just wanted to give you the last minute or two here to talk about where people could find you, if you have anything going on, if you have any last things you want to share before you head out.
That's like the worst thing to share at this moment in the conversation. It's like, oh, and like my post. If anybody who just looks up my name can find me. Go back to the interview when I talked about like the network state and how everything's great over here at the network school, and let me plug the network school instead of my stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Thank you for spending some time with me again today. And so my apologies for going over, but I think the stuff that we spoke about there at the end was important, deep, heavy stuff. So thanks for bringing that. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going and chatting with you again. Yeah, I'm just grateful for your time. So thank you for passing through.
Well, thank you for passing through or passing around again.
Thank you for passing through today. Yeah, you, dear listener. Thank you for your support, for your attention, for spending some time with me and this episode's guest. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, rate it, like it, tell your friends about it, buy a billboard somewhere next to a highway promoting it. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but your support really does mean a lot to me. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next time.